Hi and welcome to another Sculptris tutorial. So today we're going to cover sculpting, and what you'll require is a Wacom tablet or a bamboo tablet, to digital paint and digital sculpt in Sculptris. Okay, so to begin with, we're going to check out the navigation. So at the moment on launching Sculptris, we are in sculpt mode, and so we have the crease brush, and so just selecting the crease brush, which the shortcut is E. You'll see when I drag on the sphere, by default the sphere is added to the scene. Now you can import your own model that you've created in any other 3D program, and begin sculpting and painting there. So as you see, just click on the actual screen to rotate and move your model around. The crease brush gives an indentation into the surface of the model. Now if you press W for wireframe, as you sculpt, Sculptris adds more triangles or polygons depending on what your mesh is made of. As you sculpt, it adds more triangles to counter for the finer details that you're creating. So as you can see, every time I sculpt, my triangle count is increasing down the bottom of the corner of the screen. Okay, so we'll take it out of wireframe just so you can see the actual result of the sculpting brush. Now, if we select Invert, which is up here, this will do the opposite effect. So now the mesh is indenting but outwards instead of the reverse, which is indenting inwards. So the invert does the opposite of what the brush does for different effects, which is fantastic when you want to achieve different results when sculpting. You press undo, that's Command Z, that will undo everything that you've done step by step as well. Okay, so now to continue on, we'll go to the rotate brush. First, to elaborate on the rotate brush, I'll just use the grab brush to actually explain the rotate brush better. So I've taken out the mesh drastically to show you the result of this brush. Now with the rotate tool, rotate brush, this will deform the mesh considerably in the direction of your choice. So depending on the radius or the size of your brush, which is dictated here in the slider, the size and the strength. So if I have the size way up, then that's going to deform the mesh considerably on a much larger scale. So I'll do that again. Now if I take the size down, it's going to deform, it's going to rotate the mesh depending on the actual width or size of my brush. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The size is dictated here on this slider, the size of your brush that you require, and the strength of your brush is dictated there. So if you to show you a drastic change, that's going to be a drastic strength of how it will affect your brush. Whereas if I take the strength down, that will be a much more gentle approach to rotating that effect of the brush. Okay, so just undo that. Okay, so that's rotate and scale. So again, take the mesh out just to explain it a bit easier. Increase the strength a bit. Okay, so then we take the scale, and the scale brush will increase or decrease the actual mesh depending once again on the radius of your brush. And so if we increase the radius, it's going to have a more drastic impact. If we decrease the radius of the brush, it's going to have a more smaller impact, of course, depending on the size of your brush. Okay, the draw button. Now the draw button is the default sculpting tool in Sculptris. It's a great tool. So if I just increase the size and strength, you could see first it will fill cavities, and then from there it will build the actual mesh up. So it will build the form of the mesh up for you, depending on what you're trying to sculpt, what you actually want to sculpt. Okay, so that's the draw tool. Once again, if you use the invert, it will do the opposite. So now it will impact in the opposite direction. So you can apply the invert button to all of the brushes, and that will give you the opposite effect of the brush. And you just select it on and off when you require it. Flatten, the Flatten brush. Now the Flatten brush does exactly what it says, and it gives a flatter surface to your mesh, depending on the outcome that you want. So once again, if you increase the size, it's going to have a more drastic impact. If you increase the strength, it's going to have a more drastic impact, and vice versa. If you take it down, you'll have a more gentle impact and a more smaller radius. Now the grab tool. The grab tool is my favorite tool. This tool pushes and pulls the mesh and is probably one of the most fastest ways to sculpt that I personally use. And if you're creating a face, human face, or creating a human body, it's by far the most fastest way for me to get the general overall proportions right up front, very fast, very quickly, and I can then work on smaller details later. But as you can see, I can deform the mesh much faster as a whole with the grab tool. It's a fantastic tool to work with when sculpting anything, really. Okay, so again, the global tool supply, so you can invert, you can increase the size, the strength, or decrease size or strength. So that's the same as all the other brushes. So inflates. Now inflates does what it says, and will increase the strength a bit. So that's going to, invert tool is on, so that's going to inflate the mesh, but at the moment, because the invert tool is on, it's doing the opposite effect. So if we switch the invert tool off, this is going to have an inflated effect on the surface of the mesh. Pinch tool. Pinch tool is a great tool. It can it does what it says and pinches the surface of the mesh to it can create like very nice fine edges of whatever you're modeling. It can give nice corners and smooth edges by pinching the surface of the mesh together. As you can see, is what's happening there. So that's pinching the mesh together to give a nice edge there, and that's really great for like sculpting clothing, sculpting sculpting any sorts of sculpting clothing, sculpting any sorts of materials, or cloth really. Yeah, so then we'll cover the smooth brush, which does exactly what it says, and it smooths out the surface of the mesh. That's a beautiful tool as well. It helps clean anything you don't want anymore up. So if you got Wireframe, you could see exactly what's happening there with the smooth tool. So the shortcut for Wireframe is W, and you can switch that on and off as you please. Okay, so we've got the reduce brush. Now the reduce brush, you'll see that's actually reducing my polygon or triangle count down the bottom, as you can see there. And reduce selected, that does this, that's doing the same. It's reducing drastically my polygon or triangle count. As you can see, it's lowering here in the bottom left corner the actual count, and over here you can see there's many very tiny triangles, and as we go over this, it's reducing every time we brush over it. It's reducing the actual polygons or triangles used. Symmetry. Symmetry is a great tool for when you want an identical, when you're sculpting something and the opposite side is identical, and it's great for the human face, great for cartoons, great for anything that requires the same to be done on the opposite side. And then you'd probably want to switch it off to get finer details at the end, so that you don't have something that looks, unless it's a cartoon, it can look identical if you so wish it to be, but for a human face, not one side of the face is perfectly identical to the other. So at one stage you would want to switch it off so that you can apply detail that's different on one side of the face to the other. But with symmetry, whatever you do on one side will affect the other. I'll take the brush size down. So now that's going to affect both sides equally. Just so you get a rough idea of what symmetry does. Okay, so they're the brushes that are in sculpt mode, and so crease, the shortcut is E, rotate, the shortcut is R, scale, the shortcut is T, draw, the shortcut is D, flatten, the shortcut is F, Grab, the shortcut is G. Inflate, the shortcut is C. Pinch, the shortcut is V. Smooth, the shortcut is B. Reduce brush, the shortcut is Y. Reduce selected, doesn't have a shortcut. Cut, neither does subdivide. Mask, the shortcut is M. Wireframe, the shortcut is W or Shift F. And Symmetry doesn't have a shortcut. But if you hover over the brushes, it will tell you. It's very simple. Sculptris is very simple to pick up and learn. Very fun program. Make sure you've got a Wacom tablet or a bamboo tablet to have fun with this program. The cheap $100 tablets works just as good as the more expensive models. So it doesn't have to cost you a lot of money to get a tablet and begin sculpting and painting in Sculptris. So yeah, so the brushes here and the general controls over here, which as I covered earlier, you can invert the brush and switch that on and off and adjust the size and the strength along the sliders. And we have the brush icon, so I'll just explain the brush icon and the material icon. If you select the brush icon, you can add any texture that you want or have taken a photo of, or if you created yourself, you can add any texture and that texture will be applied. That texture will be applied on the actual brush. So I've already got a texture, like a very stony texture applied earlier, which I've added, and you just go in here and go new and add set, and you select whatever image that you want to be used as a texture, and now that image is now on being used as an alpha or as a mask as I'm painting. Obviously you can pick whatever texture you want to give subtle effects or drastic effects, whatever you're trying to achieve when sculpting. So with that enabled, you can also select invert, which does the opposite, which will go the opposite direction to as I've covered earlier with the other brushes. So you've got, once enabled, you can invert it to do the opposite effect. You can also select directional, so this will go in the direction of the actual brush stroke as you sculpt. If you select random, this will go in constantly vary the actual direction of the brush stroke as you go. So, and then you can switch them on and off as you please. Okay, and so the material icon is fantastic for applying different lighting materials, different different materials and different actual lighting to your actual scene. So that's an awesome reflective surface. Depending on what you're trying to actually create, you can play around with these different presets, material presets, and yeah, have a lot of fun with Sculptris. It's a very intuitive, very artistic, creative program that you'll pick up very easily. And yeah, I hope you've learned something and enjoyed this tutorial. Thank you.